A woman in blinding neon yoga gear, clutching a Bluetooth speaker blasting meditation music, stood at my modest lakeside craft booth and screamed in my face. "You're ruining the entire spiritual energy of this lake." That was the moment I knew I was about to enter a war I hadn't signed up for. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I ended up doing to push back. Let me ask you, should someone really be able to shut down handmade candles and wood carvings just because they do yoga? Comment below where you're watching from, because what happened next might just change the way you see your own backyard. Let me take you back to where this all started. Blue Brush Lake sits in Door County, Wisconsin, where peaceful wooden cabins dot the shoreline of crystal clear water that reflects the morning sun like scattered diamonds. I'm Toby Garrison, 32 years old, and I inherited my grandfather's cabin along with his passion for woodworking. Growing up, I'd spend summers here with Grandpa Joe, following him through the morning mist as he taught me to track deer. I remember one particular dawn when I was 8 years old, and he gripped my shoulder with his calloused hand, saying, "Boy, this land has been in our family since before Wisconsin was a state. Promise me you'll always protect it, no matter what tries to take it away." I promised, not understanding that decades later I'd have to honor that vow in ways neither of us could have imagined. My wife Mallory, 34, had studied law for 3 years before discovering her true calling making handmade candles. She'd work in our kitchen, filling the air with the warm scents of beeswax and pine essential oils, creating these incredible candles that smelled like the Wisconsin forest itself. Every morning you could find me on the front porch, carving intricate forest animals from red pine, while the gentle lapping of lake waves provided the perfect soundtrack. Our life was simple and beautiful, surrounded by neighbors who'd become genuine friends over the years, old Pete who ran the bait shop, the Martinez family with their 3 kids who loved feeding ducks, and Mrs. Henderson who brought us fresh cookies every Sunday after church. Tourists would wander by our cabin during their lakeside walks, drawn by the sound of my carving tools and the amazing aromas drifting from Mallory's workshop. A newlywed couple from Milwaukee spent an hour examining Mallory's candles, finally purchasing 6 of them. "These smell exactly like our honeymoon cabin in northern Wisconsin," the bride said with tears in her eyes. "Every time we light them, we'll remember this perfect weekend." These interactions happened daily, creating connections that felt meaningful in an increasingly disconnected world. After months of these impromptu sales, Mallory and I decided to make it official. We set up Blue Brush Crafts every weekend, a small booth displaying my carved pine bird sculptures, Mallory's forest-scented candles, and cute miniature cabin keychains I'd started making. The community response was incredible. Our neighbor Jake would stop by with his morning coffee, chatting about fishing while examining my latest carvings. Everyone kept saying the same thing. Finally, something special happening at this lake. The craft booth became more than a business. It was a gathering place that brought our quiet community together in ways we'd never experienced before. That's when our peaceful existence came to a screeching halt. On our 3rd weekend of operation, a shocking pink SUV with Namas Goddess stickers plastered across the back windshield pulled up to our booth. Out stepped Priscilla Daggert, and I knew immediately that trouble had arrived in Door County. She wore a neon crop top that could be seen from space, leopard print leggings that somehow made my eyes hurt, and glittery sneakers that sparkled with every step. But what really announced her presence was the mini Bluetooth speaker clutched in her perfectly manicured hand, blasting meditation music loud enough to wake hibernating bears. The overwhelming scent of vanilla perfume hit us like a wall, so strong that I actually took a step backward. "I'm Priscilla Daggert, president of the HOA for this area," she announced, her voice dripping with the kind of affected importance that makes your skin crawl. The speaker continued pumping out Om Mani Padme Hum while she spoke, creating this surreal soundtrack to what I was beginning to realize would be a very uncomfortable conversation. "Do you have the proper permits for this commercial operation?" Her eyes were scanning our booth like a detective searching for evidence of a major crime. I tried to stay polite, explaining that we were just selling a few handmade items, nothing that would bother anyone, but Priscilla's expression grew more dramatic with each word I spoke. "I'm creating a wellness sanctuary for the entire state of Wisconsin," she declared, gesturing broadly at the lake as if she owned it. "This cheap craft booth completely destroys the aesthetic I'm building here." The way she said cheap made my blood pressure spike, but Mallory squeezed my hand, her signal to stay calm. I could see her lawyer brain already working, analyzing this woman and the situation we were walking into. Priscilla continued her rant, pulling out her iPhone and snapping photos of our booth from every conceivable angle. She made notes with dramatic flourishes, muttering things like commercial violation and environmental disruption. Before leaving, she delivered her parting shot. "You'll be hearing from me very soon. I will protect the spiritual energy of this lake." As her pink SUV disappeared down the road, that vanilla perfume lingered in the air like a warning. Mallory turned to me with worried eyes and said, "Honey, I have a really bad feeling about this woman." I watched the pink vehicle vanish around the bend and felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I feel like we just met our nemesis," I told her, and unfortunately, I was absolutely right. Before the formal attack came, Mallory and I decided to attend our first HOA meeting, thinking we should understand the organization that governed our little community. The meeting was held in Mrs. Patterson's living room, with about 12 residents sitting on folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. Priscilla dominated the discussion from the moment we arrived, wearing another neon outfit and speaking with the fervor of someone announcing a religious revelation. "I envision transforming our entire lakefront into Wisconsin's premier wellness destination," she declared, gesturing dramatically with her bedazzled water bottle. "We need strict aesthetic guidelines to maintain spiritual harmony, no wind chimes because they disrupt energy flow, cabin colors limited to earth tones only, and absolutely no commercial activities that lower our consciousness vibration." The other residents looked confused and uncomfortable, glancing at each other with expressions that clearly said, "Who is this person and what is she talking about?" I whispered to Mallory, "Did she just say wind chimes disrupt energy flow?" Mallory squeezed my hand, trying not to laugh, but we both realized we weren't dealing with a reasonable person. When Priscilla noticed our whispered exchange, her eyes narrowed with the intensity of someone who'd found her opposition. "Some people resist positive change," she said, staring directly at us, "but spiritual evolution cannot be stopped by those trapped in materialistic thinking." The meeting ended with most residents looking bewildered and slightly afraid of this intense newcomer, who seemed determined to revolutionize their quiet neighborhood. 3 days later, the real attack came via certified mail. The envelope bore a gaudy pink lotus logo that screamed, "Spiritual but make it corporate," and inside was a formal letter with the heading, "Cease and Desist, Unsex Act, Yunnan Security Commercial Activity." The accusations were detailed and ridiculous: violation of residential zoning laws, creation of traffic congestion, excessive noise levels, and my personal favorite, disruption of community wellness initiatives. The ultimatum was crystal clear: shut down our booth within 7 days or face fines of $500 per day. I stared at the letter in disbelief, reading it 3 times before the reality sank in. "Excessive noise?" I said to Mallory. "The birds on this lake make more noise than we do." Mallory's analytical mind kicked into high gear immediately. "I'm going to research local ordinances," she said, already pulling out her laptop. "There has to be a way to fight this legally." We decided to do some detective work around the neighborhood, talking to people who'd been living here longer than Priscilla's 8-month residency. What we discovered was enlightening and infuriating in equal measure. Tom Richards, who owned the green cabin next to the boat launch, was caught in the middle of our conflict. "I like your craft booth," he told me honestly, "but Priscilla makes some interesting points about bringing more visitors to the area. Maybe some kind of compromise could work?" His uncertainty reflected the community's confusion about this sudden upheaval in their peaceful routine. Mrs. Henderson, a 75-year-old who'd lived here for 30 years, pulled us aside with the real story. "That girl moved here 8 months ago and immediately started talking about transforming the entire neighborhood," she whispered conspiratorially. "She failed at opening some yoga studio in Madison and came here to start her spiritual journey with her inheritance money. She's been going house to house, trying to convince people that change is inevitable and they should embrace her vision before getting left behind." The picture became clearer as more neighbors shared their experiences. Priscilla had been systematically approaching residents with her grand plan, promising increased property values and spiritual enlightenment, while subtly threatening those who didn't immediately embrace her ideas. Her escalation came exactly 1 week after the letter. I was setting up our booth for what I thought might be our last weekend when the pink SUV returned, this time with Priscilla wearing a full yoga outfit complete with a matching headband. She'd brought what she claimed was a professional sound meter, though it looked suspiciously like just an app on her phone. "I'm documenting the noise violations for my report to the city," she announced dramatically, waving the phone around our quiet booth. Then came her real agenda. "I'm going to turn this area into a premium wellness destination. I cannot allow cheap crafts to lower the property values and destroy my vision." The threat that followed was delivered with the kind of theatrical flair that would make soap opera actresses jealous. If you don't comply with my cease and desist order, I'm reporting environmental violations to the city government. I felt my patience evaporating like morning mist on the lake. Every instinct told me to confront her directly, to tell this entitled newcomer exactly what I thought of her threats and her ridiculous vision. But Mallory's steady presence kept me grounded. "Stay calm, honey," she whispered. "We need to be smarter than she is." That evening, Mallory worked late into the night, researching HOA regulations and looking for any violations on Priscilla's part. What she found was promising. Priscilla had been violating multiple community rules herself, from letting her dogs run unleashed to hosting noisy yoga sessions that exceeded the community noise ordinances. We filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, documenting every violation with photos and witness statements. For 48 hours, I felt hopeful that reason would prevail and this nightmare would end. Then came the response that made my heart sink. Our complaint was dismissed without investigation. Worse, we received a counter-accusation of harassment against a board member. It turned out that Priscilla had cultivated 2 allies on the 5-person HOA board, recent retirees from Chicago who were charmed by her promises of increased property values and cultural sophistication. The following weekend, I had to pack up our booth for what felt like the last time. As I loaded our handmade items into boxes, Priscilla celebrated her victory by hosting a gratitude yoga session directly in front of our cabin. Her Bluetooth speaker pumped out Om Mani Padme Hum from 6 in the morning until 8 at night, turning our peaceful home into an unwilling meditation soundtrack. The irony wasn't lost on me. She complained about our excessive noise while blasting mantras for 14 hours straight. That night, as the repetitive chanting finally stopped, Mallory looked at me with determination I hadn't seen since her law school days. "Honey, I have a crazy idea," she said quietly, "but I need time to research it properly." I looked out at the lake, moonlight dancing on the water that had been in our family for generations, and felt like there was something important I was missing, some piece of our family history that might hold the key to fighting back. Priscilla's next attack came from an unexpected direction, the city government itself. She'd escalated our little neighborhood dispute into an official municipal matter, filing what she called an environmental impact assessment with the Door County Planning Office. Her accusations were creative, I'll give her that. Our craft booth was allegedly causing lake pollution, attracting excessive vehicle traffic, and disturbing the local wildlife population. Within 2 weeks, a city inspector appeared at our door. A stern man named Frank Morrison, who clearly viewed his job as finding violations rather than helping small businesses comply with regulations. The inspection was humiliating and thorough. Morrison examined every aspect of our craft booth operation, from our waste disposal methods to our customer parking arrangements. "You're operating a commercial business in a residential zone without proper permits," he stated matter-of-factly, writing notes on his clipboard. "The complaint alleges environmental damage and traffic disruption." I tried to explain that we sold maybe 20 items per weekend to neighbors and tourists, but Morrison wasn't interested in context. He handed me a citation for $1,200 and an injunction that banned all business activities on our property indefinitely. Mallory's face went pale as she signed the acknowledgement paperwork, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. That night, I found Mallory crying in our kitchen for the first time since I'd known her. This woman who'd handled law school stress, family deaths, and every crisis with unshakable composure was finally breaking down. "I've researched everything," she sobbed, surrounded by open law books and printed articles. "Why is one person allowed to be this cruel? We never hurt anyone, never caused problems, never did anything except try to share what we love with our community." Seeing Mallory, my strong, brilliant wife, completely defeated triggered something primal in me. I held her close and made a promise that would change everything. "We're not giving up. There has to be another way to fight this, and I'm going to find it." The next morning, I needed to do something with my hands to process the rage and helplessness I was feeling. I decided to clean out our basement, a project I'd been putting off for years. Among the boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture, I remembered something my father had mentioned years ago, a leather trunk that had belonged to my grandfather, with strict instructions never to throw it away because it might be important someday. The trunk was buried under decades of accumulated storage, and when I finally opened it, I discovered something that made my heart race: bundles of papers dating back to 1892. Hand-drawn maps of our lake, and hunting licenses from before Wisconsin was fully settled. The most important document was a formal deed with ornate calligraphy that read, Bluebrush Lake Garrison Family Hunting Reserve, established 1892. I ran upstairs with shaking hands, spreading the documents across our kitchen table while calling for Mallory. The transformation was immediate. Seeing these historical papers pulled her out of her despair and activated her legal mind like nothing I'd seen before. Section 29.889, she said, already pulling up legal databases on her laptop with renewed energy. Traditional family hunting rights are preserved in perpetuity and can be reactivated with proper documentation. Our investigation revealed something incredible. These hunting rights had never been officially revoked, just forgotten as generations pass and the lake area developed into a residential community. My great-great-grandfather had been a renowned hunter and conservationist who'd worked with the territorial government to establish this private preserve as a way to protect the lake's ecosystem while maintaining traditional land use rights. If we could reactivate these rights, we'd have legal authority to regulate public activities on the entire lake, including the kind of large-scale events that Priscilla was planning. But I struggled with the moral implications of what we were considering. I never wanted to use old laws to fight modern problems, I told Mallory as we sat looking at the 19th century documents spread across our table. This feels like cheating, like we're exploiting some legal loophole instead of winning fair and square. Mallory looked at me with eyes that held both exhaustion and renewed hope. Honey, what Priscilla is doing isn't fair either. She's using money and influence and legal intimidation to destroy something beautiful that brings joy to people. Maybe your great-great-grandfather left us these rights for exactly this kind of situation, to protect our family land from people who would exploit it for personal gain. Meanwhile, Priscilla was becoming increasingly bold in her provocations. She organized a victory meditation festival with 50 participants, setting up right in front of our cabin with professional sound equipment that pumped out mantras from dawn to dusk. Her social media posts celebrated successfully removing commercial pollution from the sacred lake environment, with photos of our empty craft booth space. She seemed completely oblivious to the legal storm that was about to change everything. As I watched her lead her followers in elaborate yoga poses on what she clearly considered her conquered territory, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about our craft booth anymore. It was about whether entitled newcomers could steamroll over established communities and destroy what made places special. That evening, as the meditation music finally stopped and the last of Priscilla's followers drove away, I stood on our porch looking out at the moonlit lake with completely new eyes. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice from that morning decades ago. Promise me you'll always protect it, no matter what tries to take it away. Maybe great-great-grandfather didn't just leave me a cabin, maybe he left me the tools to honor that promise. Maybe great-great-grandfather left me more than just a cabin, I said to Mallory. Maybe he left me the tools to protect what he loved. The next morning, we would start the process that would turn a 19th century hunting preserve into a 21st century weapon against HOA tyranny. Finding the right lawyer for our unusual situation proved challenging, until we connected with Buck Hartwell, an attorney who specialized in traditional land rights and historical property law. When we met him at his office in Green Bay, his eyes lit up as he examined our great-great-grandfather's documents. This is an extremely rare case, he said, handling the aged papers with reverence, but it's absolutely viable with proper documentation and filing procedures. I've handled maybe 3 similar cases in 20 years of practice, and 2 of them were successful. Then came the sobering reality check. However, I need to be completely honest with you about the risks. The state could challenge the reactivation. Your neighbors might oppose the hunting designation, and if we lose, you'll be responsible for significant court costs. This isn't a guaranteed victory. It's a calculated gamble that could cost you everything. Mallory and I looked at each other across Hartwell's desk, the weight of the decision settling on our shoulders. What's the alternative? Mallory asked quietly. We accept defeat, pack up our lives, and let Priscilla transform our community into whatever she wants? I thought about my grandfather's words, about the generations of our family who'd called this lake home, about the neighbors who'd supported our craft booth, and the tourists whose faces lit up when they found something authentic and handmade. We're going to do it, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Whatever it costs, whatever the risks, we're going to fight for what's ours. Hartwell smiled and shook our hands. Then let's make some history, he said. The documentation process was intensive and meticulous. We spent weeks scanning and authenticating every piece of paper from that leather trunk, contacting the Wisconsin Historical Society to verify our family records, and photographing every detail of the old maps and hunting permits. Mallory coordinated with genealogy experts to establish an unbroken chain of family ownership, while I researched the specific boundaries that our hunting preserve would encompass. We prepared a comprehensive application titled Reactivation of Historical Family Hunting Preserve that included 67 pages of supporting documentation and historical evidence. One evening, exhausted from paperwork and legal research, Mallory and I decided to take our small rowboat out to the middle of the lake. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and pink, and for the first time in weeks, we felt peaceful. "This is what we're fighting for," Mallory said quietly, trailing her fingers in the warm water. "Not just our business, but this feeling of home." We sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the lake that had shaped my family for over a century, both of us understanding that we were fighting for more than just property rights, we were fighting for home. While we prepared our legal strategy, Priscilla was escalating her own plans with complete confidence in her victory. She'd begun live streaming on social media platforms, hosting sessions called Transforming Rural Wisconsin, where she'd stand beside the lake with her followers online, describing her vision for a wellness destination that would elevate the consciousness of the entire Midwest. Her language became increasingly grandiose and disconnected from reality. "Some people cling to outdated ways of thinking," she told her virtual audience, clearly referring to us. "But spiritual evolution requires us to transcend materialistic attachments and embrace higher purposes." The comments section filled with supportive emojis from urban followers who had no understanding of rural community dynamics, but were enchanted by her promises of spiritual transformation. Her Blue Brush Wellness Retreat weekend marketing campaign reached new levels of ambition. She'd created professional promotional materials featuring stock photos of serene lakes and impossibly flexible yoga practitioners, selling tickets for $75 each through a booking website that promised a transformative lakeside wellness experience. Food trucks were confirmed from Milwaukee and Madison, yoga instructors were arriving from Chicago and Minneapolis, and she'd even arranged for lifestyle bloggers to cover what she called the transformation of rural Wisconsin wellness culture. Everything was perfectly positioned for her moment of triumph, and she had absolutely no idea that a 130-year-old hunting preserve was about to destroy all her plans. Our appointment at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources felt like the most important meeting of our lives. Officer Janet Mills initially seemed skeptical when we explained our request, but her expression changed as she examined our documentation. "I've been working in natural resources for 15 years, she said, carefully reviewing each historical document, and I've never seen such comprehensive proof of traditional hunting rights. The Historical Society's authentication, the genealogical records, the original territorial documentation, this is exactly the kind of case that Wisconsin's heritage preservation laws were designed to protect." She paused, looking up at us seriously. "If this application is approved, you'll have legal authority to regulate all public activities within a 500-yard radius of the lake shoreline, including the power to limit noise levels, control access, and restrict large gatherings." The 2-week processing period felt like the longest 14 days of my life. Every morning I'd wake up wondering if this was the day we'd get the call that would determine our future. Mallory couldn't sleep, spending her nights alternating between researching backup plans and staring out at the lake, wondering if we'd still call it home much longer. Meanwhile, Priscilla's confidence was reaching new heights. She had ordered professional signs reading "Blue Brush Wellness Sanctuary Quiet Zone" and began posting flyers around the neighborhood announcing her retreat weekend. The Sunday night before our Monday morning appointment to receive the DNR's decision, neither Mallory nor I could sleep. We sat on our porch watching the moonlight dance on the lake water, both of us knowing that the next 24 hours would determine whether we'd found a brilliant solution or were about to face even more devastating defeat. Monday morning at the DNR offices, Officer Mills greeted us with a smile that immediately told me everything I needed to know. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Garrison," she said, holding up an official certificate with the state seal. "Your application has been approved. Blue Brush Lake is now officially registered as the Garrison Family Historical Hunting Preserve." The certificate was beautiful, with formal language that granted us authority to regulate public events, control noise levels, and limit access within the designated preservation area. For the first time in months, Mallory and I looked at each other and genuinely laughed. with relief and joy. We rushed home to prepare for what we knew would be the confrontation of our lives. Our first stop was the print shop, where we ordered official signs reading "Print Mud, Hunting Zone, Public Lands, Public by Law" in bold letters that couldn't be missed. We installed security cameras around our property and researched the exact extent of our new powers. We could call police for violations, issue trespass warnings, and legally shut down any unauthorized public gatherings within our preservation zone. Everything was perfectly legal, completely official, and absolutely devastating to Priscilla's plans. The community reaction to our signs was mixed and immediate. Mrs. Henderson stopped by with a plate of cookies and a huge grin. "I don't know exactly what you two are up to," she said conspiratorially, "but anything that stops that woman's nonsense has my full support." However, not everyone was thrilled. Tom Richards approached us with genuine concern. "I understand you're fighting back against Priscilla," he said, "but a hunting zone? Some of us have kids who play near the lake. How do we know this is safe?" Mallory patiently explained that the hunting preserve was a legal designation that gave us regulatory authority, not an actual hunting operation. "We're not going to be shooting anything," she assured him. "We're just using historical rights to protect our community from commercial exploitation." It took several conversations, but most neighbors eventually understood and supported our strategy. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for Priscilla's grand yoga festival. Food trucks were arriving early, yoga instructors were setting up their equipment, and 200 people had paid $75 each to attend what Priscilla had marketed as a life-changing wellness experience. She'd invested over $15,000 in professional sound systems, catering deposits, instructor fees, and promotional materials. A local newspaper photographer was documenting the setup, and several lifestyle bloggers were live streaming the preparation process. Everything was perfect for Priscilla's moment of triumph, until I started installing our official DNR signs right in the middle of her event space. "What the hell is this?" Priscilla screamed, abandoning her Zen persona entirely as she stormed over to confront me. "You cannot just put up fake signs to sabotage my legal event." Her voice cracked with panic as she realized that something was very wrong with her perfect plan. Several of her retreat attendees gathered around, creating a tense crowd of confused people who'd paid significant money for an event that was clearly in jeopardy. I calmly handed her the official DNR certificate, watching her face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning horror as she read the state seal and formal language granting us legal authority over the lake area. "This is impossible," she kept repeating, her voice rising to a near shriek. "You can't have hunting rights in the middle of a residential neighborhood." The situation escalated quickly when Priscilla called the police, demanding that officers arrest me for vandalism and event sabotage. When 2 patrol cars arrived, I was ready with all our documentation. The officers examined our DNR certificate, cross-referenced it with their database, and confirmed that our hunting preserve registration was completely legitimate and legally binding. "Ma'am," the senior officer told Priscilla, "this gentleman's paperwork is valid. Your event cannot proceed as planned because it violates the restrictions of this private hunting zone." The crowd of retreat attendees began murmuring anxiously, realizing their weekend plans were collapsing in real time. What happened next was like watching a small business disaster unfold in real time. But it became even more chaotic when several attendees began confronting Priscilla directly. A woman from Madison, who'd driven 3 hours for the retreat, demanded to know why Priscilla hadn't secured proper permits. "I took time off work for this," she said angrily. "You advertise this as a legal, organized event." A yoga instructor from Chicago who'd flown in specifically for the festival was nearly in tears. "I turned down other gigs for this weekend," she said. "How am I supposed to get home now?" 200 angry attendees demanded immediate refunds for their $75 tickets, while food truck operators threatened lost setup costs and spoiled inventory. A reporter from the Door County Herald, who'd come to cover what she thought would be a positive community story, found herself documenting a complete meltdown instead. She interviewed confused attendees, photographed Priscilla's increasingly frantic attempts to salvage the situation, and captured video of the moment when reality fully hit our wannabe wellness guru. The reporter's presence seemed to make Priscilla even more desperate, as she realized her public failure was being documented for the local newspaper. The meltdown was spectacular and public. Priscilla completely lost her composure, throwing yoga props across the grass while screaming about her ruined investment and destroyed reputation. I put everything into this event. My money, my reputation, my entire future. She was crying and raging simultaneously, while dozens of people recorded her breakdown on their phones. The police had to intervene to calm the situation and help manage the crowd of frustrated attendees who were demanding answers and refunds that Priscilla clearly couldn't provide. By afternoon, the festival site was completely dismantled. Food trucks drove away with their unused inventory, disappointed yoga enthusiasts loaded their mats into cars while complaining about their wasted weekend plans, and Priscilla sat alone among scattered meditation cushions and abandoned promotional banners. From our porch, Mallory and I watched the aftermath with mixed emotions. "I almost feel sorry for her," Mallory said quietly. "Watching someone's dreams completely collapse is harder to witness than I expected. But any sympathy I might have felt evaporated when I saw Priscilla making furious phone calls, gesturing angrily in our direction while clearly plotting her next move. The war was far from over. We'd just won the first major battle." Priscilla's legal counterattack came swift and expensive. She hired Davidson and Associates, the prestigious Milwaukee law firm specializing in property disputes and municipal law. Within a week, we received a formal lawsuit demanding $75,000 in damages for abuse of antiquated laws, intentional business interference, and public nuisance. The suit also named the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, claiming they'd improperly approved our hunting preserve without adequate environmental review. Attorney Davidson's cover letter was professionally threatening, suggesting that our exploitation of outdated hunting rights would not withstand serious legal scrutiny. But while Priscilla was preparing her legal assault, curious community members were conducting their own investigation into our mysterious new neighbor. What they discovered was explosive. Priscilla had been secretly negotiating with Lakeshore Development Corporation to purchase large sections of lake property for a commercial yoga resort project. The development deal, if successful, would have netted her $2.3 million, while transforming our quiet residential lake into a commercial wellness destination with hundreds of visitors every weekend. The truth came out through an anonymous email sent to the local newspaper, containing screenshots of text messages between Priscilla and the development company's representatives. The messages revealed her real strategy: eliminate local resistance to commercialization by shutting down existing businesses and activities, then present herself as the community's chosen representative for development negotiations. One particularly damning message read, "Once I eliminate the local resistance to change, we can proceed with property acquisition. These simple people don't understand the real estate potential of lakefront property. They think small, crafts, and candles, while I think transformation and profit." The community reaction was immediate and furious. Residents realized that Priscilla had never cared about tranquility, wellness, or spiritual sanctuaries. She'd been working to profit from commercializing the lake while pretending to protect it. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following Thursday, with a single agenda item: removing Priscilla from the board for deceptive practices and conflicts of interest. Mrs. Henderson, who'd lived at the lake for 30 years, became the unofficial spokesperson for angry residents. "That woman lied to all of us about her intentions," she declared. "She never wanted to preserve anything. She wanted to cash in on our beautiful lake and destroy the community we've built here." Our court hearing took place on a rainy Wednesday morning at the Door County Courthouse, with Judge Patricia Wong presiding over what had become a much larger case than anyone anticipated. The courtroom was packed with curious residents, reporters, and even some of Priscilla's failed retreat attendees who wanted to see justice served. Attorney Davidson argued that hunting zones created safety hazards in residential areas and that historical preservation laws shouldn't override modern zoning requirements. His presentation was professional but felt disconnected from the reality of what had actually happened at our lake. When our turn came, Buck Hartwell presented a masterful defense of traditional land use rights, but the real moment of triumph belonged to Mallory. She stood up at our table and asked to address the court directly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying the confidence I remembered from her law school days, "I'd like to speak not as a legal expert, but as someone who's lived through what happens when one person decides to transform an entire community without consent or consideration for existing residents." She described our peaceful life before Priscilla's arrival, the craft booth that brought neighbors together, and the systematic campaign of intimidation and legal harassment we'd endured. "We didn't use these hunting rights as a weapon. We used them as a shield to protect something beautiful from someone who wanted to destroy it for personal profit. The turning point came when Hartwell presented evidence of Priscilla's secret development deal. The court heard testimony from Lakeshore Development Corporation's representative who confirmed the $2.3 million offer contingent on community compliance and elimination of local opposition to commercial development. Priscilla's real motivations were exposed in open court, with Judge Wong visibly disapproving of the deception. When Priscilla took the witness stand, her testimony was defensive and contradictory, making it clear that her lawsuit was motivated by financial loss rather than legitimate legal grievances. The media attention exploded beyond anything we'd expected. Local news stations picked up the story with headlines like, "HOA President's Secret Development Deal Exposed," and "Yoga Guru's $1 million lake scheme revealed." The hashtag Lake Karen began trending regionally, with people sharing their own HOA horror stories in the comments. Judge Wong's ruling was comprehensive and decisive. Our hunting preserve was declared completely legitimate and legally enforceable under Wisconsin historical preservation statutes. Priscilla was ordered to pay court costs plus our legal fees, totaling $8,200. Most importantly, the judge issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting any harassment of our family and recognizing our legal authority over the hunting preserve. The judge's written opinion included language about bad faith legal proceedings and abuse of the judicial system for personal financial gain, ensuring that Priscilla's deceptive tactics were officially documented in the court record. The community consequences were immediate and severe. The emergency HOA meeting resulted in an 89% vote to remove Priscilla from the board, with Mrs. Henderson elected as the new president on a platform of reasonable community development and respect for existing residents. Priscilla's yoga group dissolved in embarrassment, and within a week, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house. The development deal collapsed entirely when Lakeshore Corporation withdrew their offer, citing negative publicity and community opposition as reasons for ending negotiations. Standing on our porch that evening, watching the sunset reflect off the lake that was now legally protected by our family's hunting preserve, I felt a satisfaction deeper than simple victory. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been served with a 130-year-old hunting license and a healthy dose of karmic irony. The transformation of our community after Priscilla's defeat was remarkable and swift. Mrs. Henderson's leadership brought a refreshing dose of common sense to the HOA, with new policies that actively supported reasonable local businesses and community activities instead of restricting them. Her first official act was to create a community enhancement committee that would evaluate proposals based on whether they brought neighbors together rather than divided them. Bluebrush Crafts reopened with enthusiastic neighborhood support, and our new signage reflected both our victory and our sense of humor. Family business since 2024, protected by historical rights established 1892. Just below that, in smaller letters that made locals chuckle, we added, "Authentic community values, no fake gurus. Welcome." Our business thrived beyond anything we'd experienced before Priscilla's interference. Neighbors made deliberate shopping trips to show their support, often bringing friends and relatives to hear the story of how we'd defeated the HOA Karen. Tourists arrived specifically to see the famous hunting zone that saved small business, turning our craft booth into an unexpected attraction. The local newspaper featured us in a front-page story titled "How a 130-Year-Old Law Saved Small Business," which was picked up by regional papers and even mentioned in a national article about creative legal solutions to HOA disputes. Orders poured in from across Wisconsin and neighboring states, with many customers mentioning they'd heard our story and wanted to support our victory over corporate wellness culture. Priscilla's complete downfall unfolded over several weeks like a slow-motion disaster that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The legal fees from her failed lawsuit, combined with the costs of her canceled retreat and the refunds she had to provide to angry attendees, forced her to sell her house at a significant loss just to avoid bankruptcy. The development deal's collapse eliminated her expected windfall, leaving her with massive debts and no income source. Her social media accounts, once filled with inspirational posts about spiritual transformation, became magnets for criticism and ridicule from people who'd followed the court case, forcing her to delete everything and disappear from the internet entirely. I couldn't resist adding some perfectly legal touches to our victory celebration. Using our new authority as operators of a private hunting preserve, I installed a subtle speaker system that played gentle bird sounds and nature recordings every morning at 6 a.m. Completely within our rights and wonderfully peaceful for everyone, except people who preferred artificial meditation music blasted at excessive volume. Mallory created a special candle scent called Victory Cedar that became our best-selling item, with customers specifically requesting the candle that celebrates defeating entitled HOA Karens. Our cabin's new sign read, Priscilla Free Zone since 2024, with a smaller line underneath that locals particularly appreciated. Love tranquility, stay as quiet as you were when you lost your lawsuit. 6 months after the court victory, Mallory and I organized the first annual Garrison Family Heritage Festival at the exact location where Priscilla had planned her yoga resort. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. We were celebrating authentic community spirit on the very spot where she'd tried to impose artificial wellness culture. Over 500 people attended our celebration of local crafts, hunting history, and community spirit. We featured demonstrations of traditional woodworking and candle making, historical exhibits about Door County's hunting heritage that my great-great-grandfather had helped establish, and live music from local bands who understood what made our area special. The festival atmosphere was magical. Children learned traditional crafts from their grandparents, teenagers asked questions about local history they'd never known, and families from neighboring communities came to experience what authentic small-town culture looked like. A reporter from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel attended and wrote a feature story about how historical preservation laws could protect community character from commercial exploitation. The article included photos of families enjoying handmade crafts and traditional demonstrations, contrasting sharply with the earlier images of Priscilla's failed yoga festival and its aftermath of disappointed attendees and abandoned equipment. During the festival, something unexpected happened that provided the perfect closure to our story. Tom Richards, the neighbor who'd initially been torn between supporting our craft booth and Priscilla's wellness vision, approached us with his family. "I owe you both an apology," he said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "I was so focused on the idea of change and progress that I didn't realize what we might lose." Watching this festival, seeing how happy everyone is, understanding what authentic community looks like, I realize Priscilla would have destroyed everything that makes this place special. His wife nodded in agreement. We got caught up in her promises about property values and cultural sophistication, but what we have here is already valuable beyond measure. That evening, as the festival wound down and families packed up their purchases and memories, I sat on our porch with a legal pad and began writing something I'd been thinking about for weeks. "Dear Grandpa Joe," I wrote, "I finally understand what you meant about protecting this land no matter what tries to take it away. It wasn't just about keeping ownership, it was about preserving what makes this place special for the people who call it home. Your hunting preserve didn't just save our craft booth, it saved our community from someone who would have turned it into something artificial and commercial. I kept my promise to you, and I used the tools you left me to honor the values you taught me. The land is safe, the community is strong, and the lake still reflects the morning sun just like it did when you first showed me how to track deer through the morning mist." The personal growth we experienced through this battle surprised both of us in the best possible ways. I learned that sometimes you must fight intelligently rather than just enduring injustice, and that knowing your rights and history can be more powerful than any expensive legal team. Mallory discovered a renewed passion for law and decided to return to school to finish her degree, specializing in property rights and community law with a focus on helping small communities protect themselves from exploitation. Our marriage grew stronger through surviving adversity together, and we gained a deeper appreciation for the community that had supported us through our struggle against someone who tried to divide and conquer us. So that's the story of how I turned an HOA Karen into an ex-resident, using a hunting law that was older than the state of Wisconsin itself. The moral of the story? Sometimes justice is delayed, but never denied. Creativity and persistence can defeat seemingly impossible odds, and the importance of knowing your rights and local history cannot be overstated. Never underestimate the power of legitimate legal rights, even if they're gathering dust in your grandfather's trunk. And remember, karma is real. It often arrives in the most unexpected forms, sometimes wearing the disguise of a hunting preserve that protects authentic community values from people who would exploit them for personal profit. Have you ever discovered hidden rights or surprising history about your own property? Comment below and share your story. You never know what historical protections might be waiting to be activated in your own backyard.
This story might be over, but QA Stories has a whole vault of mayhem waiting. Choose your next rabbit hole wisely.